Well, joining me today is a guy that I first got to really sit and spend some time with over last weekend at VO Atlanta. We've known each other for probably a couple of years, but just never really had a chance to talk in depth. And we got a chance to share a meal together. And I thought, well, hell, let's get this guy on the podcast and see what he's really all about. You may know him from another VO podcast, which he hosts with one of actually my students, Jake Sanders, along with Charles Coates and Alden Schoenberg. That's another VO podcast available, of course, wherever you get your podcasts. Please welcome to the podcast, the VO Pro Podcast, Troy Holden. How are you, buddy?
Hey, Paul, I'm great, man. It's good to be here, and like you, I'm glad we had a chance to catch up and chat a little more this last year. You know, you feel like you get to know so many people in this industry, but you don't know them,
No.
and you want to connect with them. But when there's 1,000 of us going 5 directions, it's hard. So when you see somebody at a table and there's an open chair, sit down and talk to them. There's your chance.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. I think it was Saturday night at VO Atlanta. And yeah, you're right. I mean, if you had to do 1,000 people, 5 people at a table at a time, you'd be going to VO Atlanta until July. So
Right.
it's long enough as it is. Dude, we got to converse a little bit the other night over a drink and a meal, and that to me is the best way to get to know somebody. So you're just outside Nashville, right? Is that where you're from, or you were a transplant?
I was born down below Nashville in a town called Murfreesboro, and we lived there till I was about 11-ish. No, actually about 8. We moved down to a place that surely I could have gotten rid of this Southern accent, Atlanta, Georgia. And then we moved to Dallas, Texas, and then we came back to the Nashville area. So I had no chance to get rid of it. So yeah, born, bred, raised here, never lived anywhere except other places that people talk like this.
So you're a kid of the Great Smoky Mountains.
Yeah. And, between here and you go from here down to Chattanooga and you've got Monteagle Mountain and all that connects across. It's beautiful. Tennessee's beautiful country. And I'm seeing a big change in the way, and this is odd, in the way people talk here now. The kids are growing up with a lot more transplanted people. So they are not as overblown with Southern accent here with the younger generation. So I think there's some truth. I'd seen this posted on the internet that the Southern accent is going away, and that's possible. I think I see that every day, and a lot of people are like, oh, it'll never go away. Well, it won't in the Appalachians and places like that. But in these more areas like Nashville that are growing and all these people coming in, it is going somewhat away. It's different.
I think you're right. I think it's transplants. And I also wonder if it's the effect of the digital world that we live in, because kids grow up with the screen in their face now, right?
Right.
We started to talk the other night, and I asked you how you got into voiceover. And of course, it was like myself, it was a long and winding journey. So how did you, for the benefit of the folks watching and listening now, how did voiceover get on your radar? Because the story you gave me was not the one I expected.
Well, oddly, it started as a very young child. When we moved to Atlanta, I was a baseball fanatic. I loved baseball, loved to play, loved to go to the games. My dad worked for a company, had season tickets to the Braves, and you're talking 1972. We're going to see, they sucked. They were, Fulton County Stadium, 40, 50,000 seats, and there's 3,000 people at every game. And the ushers knew us by name. They'd bring us down. We could sit behind the dugout. But I got to see Henry Aaron play a lot of games. The Reds would come to town, and I wanted to go to every game when they came in to see Johnny Bench. He was my hero at the time. So when I would go home and I couldn't go to the game, I listened to the games on WSB, and it was Ernie Johnson, Milo Hamilton, not Ernie Johnson Jr. And those guys influenced me, and I started hearing the commercials played during the game. So I would get out my cassette recorder, and I would get the newspaper, and I would read those commercials. I would try to narrate the games. I would give the sports scores. I did that all the way up through high school. I even had, like a DJ station in my room, dual turntables. I wanted to go to radio. And I went to Middle Tennessee State University, went into mass comm. I found out what you made in radio, and I immediately switched to get a business degree. I said, I will
Smarter
starve
than I
to
was,
death.
you were.
Yeah, I said, I'll starve to death. This is crazy. You're going to work yourself to death. And after that, after I got into school, my dad opened his own business. He was in the garment supply business, industrial sewing equipment. That was back when the United States had sewing factories. And that was what he did. He catered to sewing factories in Tennessee and Kentucky. So he talked to me one night and he said, I've been offered this line of products. Do you want to come to work in the business? And I did. I did that for about 13 years. And then I transitioned into the automotive world at Nissan and Smyrna, and went into other tier companies later as a general manager. And I opened up like 3 greenfield operations in the automotive business. So when COVID hit, I was at one of those suppliers and they said, hey, we're bringing people back to work. We want to make videos. You've got a pretty soothing voice. You think you could narrate the videos, like stay 6 feet apart, do this, do that. And I said, sure, I could do that. So they throw the videos together. We write scripts. I record the videos on a headset mic. It sounded terrible. But the HR lady ended up going and buying, I don't remember what it was. It was an MXL mic, and we re-recorded everything, and it sounded a lot better. And I was like, hey, that's pretty good. And she said, you could make a living doing this. And I said, well, please explain to me how, because I am burnt out with automotive. And when COVID happened, I was really burnt out. I mean, I was a logistics manager in the middle of all those supplier shortages.
So hold on one second. You looked the HR lady in the eye and said, I'm burnt out?
Yeah.
Wow,
I did.
You must have been burnt out.
And she also was in that condition. She'd been doing it a long time, and we were really close. And she said, I'll do anything I can to help you do this. And she kind of pointed me to some YouTube videos and this and that. And that's where it started. Like a lot of people, I just dug in and self-taught. And then I took the wrong path for a while. And then I realized this can't be how you make a living. This is ridiculous. And then I started finding all the people that were more legitimate, I guess is the way to put it, that I could rely on and trust. And I luckily had the sweetest guy in the world that lived very close to me. His name was J.J. Wilson, who had been in voiceover for 40 years. His dad was the person that Howard Stern came in and took over for on NBC Radio. I mean, he had that background from his whole life. And I find out JJ's only an hour away from me. So we started having breakfast, and he just took me under his wing and mentored me and brought me into he and Linda Bruno's group. And it went from there. And that was when the path changed. And I realized I can do this and I can make a living.
And JJ is one of my favorite people in this business, man.
He's awesome, and God bless him. He's been through a lot the last year or so with his health, and I think about him every day and try to check on him at least every few weeks. He's had a tough time.
What happens next?
Well, from there, it became, I'm still working full time. I started setting a target of how can I do this for a living? And 18 months from the day I started, I turned in my notice where I was working, and we're going full time. And that was all because of my wife, who I came home one night and I said, I've been there 6 years. I knew it was my last stop. I figured I'd be there till I retired. And I had always had 4.5, 5 on all my reviews. They hand me a review with a 2 on it. And I'm like, I know I'm burnt out, but I have not lost my sting. I was coming in, giving it all I had. And the person who was over me was never there pre-COVID. And then all of a sudden now they're there all the time and everybody's coming to me. And I don't think he liked it a lot. So the message when I came home was she said, just go in tomorrow and resign. And I said, well, I don't want to just cut it yet. I'd like to have some time to prepare. It was October. She said, well, tell them you're retiring December 31st. And that's what I did. And that gave me 3 months to prep. So, was it enough? Probably not. I would have loved to have waited another year, but there's always a bigger plan, and it worked out fine.
Yeah, it did work out fine. You mentioned sort of, as you put it, going down a wrong path. Tell me about that. And then tell me about how I guess JJ was responsible for sort of redirecting you. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, he was, because I didn't realize there are different worlds, I guess, if you look at it in a way in VO. And I was down this path of cheap work because there were a lot of people pushing that on Facebook and Facebook groups. Just go here and go here. And in all honesty, in 2020, you probably could have jumped in that way and made enough money to start paying for coaches and doing that. You can't do that anymore. There used to be X number of people on these platforms, and now it's like 5 times that, and you cannot progress and get out of the hole. Once you go in there, you're going to be depressed, you're going to be sick, and you're going to be, you'll never get out. I was fortunate that immediately, I think I got onto my first platform in August. I got a job the second day I was on the platform, and it just kept going. Now, yeah, it was some cheap work, but luckily a few months later, as I ran into the right people, I knew to take that money and invest in good coaching. I knew to take that money and make sure my room was better, my equipment was better. And I slowly took those steps, with tutelage from JJ and Linda and with coaching from them, and then them pointing me to here, let me help you go to this person to get some better work and get out of this hole. But their advice was, if you have to do this other to get you by, just shut up about it. Don't talk about it and get out of the hole as fast as you can. That advice helped me because I needed that extra money to pay for what I wanted to do. But on the other hand, I didn't want to pollute once I learned what rates were and how it was. So quickly, within a few months, I was out of that hole pretty quickly. I had a couple of agents. I started reaching out to people direct, and right or wrong, I started getting those 4 or 5 decent clients I had cultivated off these crappy platforms and went, look, if they throw me off, they throw me off, but here's my email address. Come to me direct, and let's do this the right way. And I still have most of those people, luckily, and they're paying me 10 times more than they did back then. And they didn't mind paying it. They knew better, but they also knew if they could find somebody that could do the work and it was really top quality work, and we were dumb enough to do it for cheap. And, we talk about this all the time. Freaking get educated as fast as you can on this, because I left tens of thousands of dollars on the table because I didn't know any better.
Right.
It's tough.
So many times I talk to folks that maybe, let's just call it what it is. They get down the Fiverr rabbit hole or the Upwork rabbit hole, right?
Yep.
And yet they cling so dearly to this idea that, well, either I'm new or for whatever reason, I have to charge these bargain basement rates.
Right.
You mentioned earlier, you didn't go into radio because you knew it didn't pay jack, right?
Right.
And even on the platforms that you were on in those days, you knew that, like, this is not a means to an end here. I'm going to just keep spinning my wheels.
Right.
What's that mindset shift that people that are so dearly hanging on to bargain basement rates, what's the mindset shift that they have to make to now know and stand up for their worth?
I think a couple of things have to happen. And the big light that went off for me the quickest was, I want to work less and make more. You're never going to do that on those platforms. You're going to work your ass off. And this is a God's honest truth, and I'll be transparent to anybody that asks me. There are over 5,000 YouTube narrations out there with me. 5,000. Wow. That's a lot. But I had about 3 clients who would send me 2 to 3 of those a day. Now, here's the upside. I became an editing genius quickly. My brain and my eyes learned very quickly how to work together, because if you're getting paid, and these were usually 6 to 8 minute narrations, sometimes a little longer. If they were paying me $25 a piece, I could make $100 an hour easy. I thought that was okay. It's still not okay. But my gosh, it paid for so many things and taught me so many things. And I kept my mouth shut. I didn't advertise I was doing all that, and it paid the bills. I'm not saying you can't take some of that in some form or fashion and up your career. Just don't advertise it. Don't make it a part of where you're going with your long game. Let that light bulb go off. Like where I'm at now, my goal is I try to get into the studio fairly early, 7:30 or so, sometimes earlier. And my goal is by 11 o'clock, I'm done, usually. Auditions are done. If I've got work in the bucket, it's done. If something comes in the afternoon, I'm coming back. But I couldn't have done that 2 years ago or a year ago. I finally got to that point where I can stand my ground. I know what to do. I took your course on pricing, and that helped so much because I know now how quickly, just bam, 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 I can put that price out there. I know quickly if I'm on voices.com, that's not right. I'm either not auditioning or here's what it should be. And when you get to that point and you know your value and you need to learn your value quickly, just because you're new doesn't mean you're not valuable. And a lot of people believe that. If you
Yeah.
have learned and you put the time in and you're valuable, oh, I haven't booked anything yet. It doesn't matter. Are you educated? The first doctor that does his first surgery gets paid the same as a guy that's doing his 100th surgery.
And I think what allows you to say, I can do this, is your training. When did
Yep.
that light bulb go on for you?
It was probably during my first year full time. I think I was still struggling. And then I started getting hired for things that I didn't expect. So I booked a job through an agency for Yellowwood, and I got paid a lot of money to say, absolutely. That was it. That was all I said. And the check came in. I said, they're going to pay me. They pay me that much for one word. Why would I record 1,500 words for $10? Why would anybody do that? So it went off that it's not like I've made it. It's just that I know what I'm doing now.
Right.
And from there, it just got better. I mean, I had a really good year with one agent, and a lot of the stuff was regional and whatever. And then this past year, although it was based on my accent, I was referred to an agency in New York that they couldn't find somebody for Pfizer to do the southern region of the U.S. on an explanation of a medication. And I thought, well, I'm not, I can do the hard words, no problem. And so I auditioned for it and I booked it. And that was my first SAG job. That was another nail, in the board to say, you're there. You just have to keep working at it. The hard thing for me has been to understand that I am what I am. I can't be somebody else. I can't book what you book. I can't book what Jake and Alden and Charles book. My voice is different. And if I try to be something else, then my authenticity goes out the freaking window.
Let's talk about that accent because I think there's a mindset thing here. You could, Troy, either choose to look at that as an asset or a liability. Tell me how you look at it and how maybe that's evolved from the time you got in the business.
Tom Antonellis was a big help with that because I went to him and I said, Tom, I want to book more work and I can't book it with this accent. And he said, well, you'll have to develop a Gen M character and you'll have to audition as that character and become that character when you audition. What we ended up going through a long process over a year deciding to do is taking words that are very easy for us to go Southern on, like the word GET. Everyone says get. Well, we don't. We say get.
Yeah.
It has an I in it.
Right.
So we identified about 30 words, and the first steps were anytime I've got an audition, I would mark it. I would look for these words, like million and fill and all that kind of stuff. So we would do that as a start, and it helped. Started booking some other things in different areas, but again, I didn't feel 1,000% authentic. But it still worked. It did help. But I had to make the decision, and this was in talking to some other people. Just be you. Quit worrying about it. I've even had casting directors say, I would rather hear you with your accent authentically than to hear you trying to do something else. And I give Mary Lynn Wisner a ton of credit because she's helped me so much, not just through coaching, but she would, if something came across her desk and she's like, that was you. I knew it was you. I mean, she's helped me with a lot of things. Pointed me in some great directions. And I think that was the other thing that went off. Once I had the confidence to just screw it, I can only do what I can do. I'll audition for a lot of things. It maybe is not in my realm. And I've booked things that I thought, what? How did I get that? I had the inauguration speech at Ohio University. I did a 12-minute narration to a video that played before a new president came in. I don't sound like Ohio at all. But they heard the authenticity and one of the people that listened to it said when it got to a certain point in there, and I can't remember, it was talking about students leaving and whatever, she said, I choked up and cried. I knew you would have the job. And that's what you want, is to touch people. It doesn't matter how you sound. And we hear that from day one. It ain't your voice. It's not your voice.
I'm very close with Craig Williams, who's originally from Scotland. We all know, dozens of people in this business with a native, we'll call it an accent if it's not general American, right?
Right.
How do you make a decision on a given job, whether you're going to take a swing when it's not calling specifically for a character or for an accent that is authentically you?
It just becomes a take one, take two thing for me. So where I have really worked hard on this thing with Tom is my first name's Charles. So I call my Gen M character Charles. I normally will put myself as the first take, but if it's an online platform, we can put that little message in the front end, hey, this is Troy. I've got a Southern accent, but your first take, I'm going to try to, Gen M it down a little bit. And then the second one's all me. They'll usually listen to both. And a lot of times I have booked the Southern one where they were asking for a Gen M. It happens because they'll hear more authenticity.
Right.
I think my strength too is in the storytelling side. So I always watch for that kind of stuff. If I can tell that story in my voice and not say too many words too Southern, I'm better off than using the other. But I'll send both, and I've booked some insurance company things, short 30-second spots to where they pick the Gen M voice. So it happens.
Sometimes people don't know they need you until they hear you.
Right.
They didn't know they were looking for you until they heard you.
Right.
You mentioned you got in during the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
How have things changed in the business in the 4 or 5 short years since COVID upended the world? Is it easier or is it harder to be a voice actor?
I think it's harder. I think between 2020 and 2022, there was a flood of people that wanted to work from home, and this became a go-to for a lot of people. What affected me the most, the first year on voices.com, I booked more my first year than I have since because there was less people on there. And I think now it's just flooded. It's just hard.
I think it's true for the pay to plays. I feel like it's also true for what I want to ask you about now, and that is you mentioned that you've made a shift. I think we talked about this the other night in Atlanta.
Yep.
You've made a shift from the pay to plays to now getting your clients the way I've always done it, through direct marketing. How did that evolve, and how did you learn to do that?
I learned because I had done it in previous businesses, and I think the thing that hit me one day was this is no different. Marketing is marketing, but I need to apply it to me. I became what I call a targeted market person. I don't need to market nationwide, although there are production houses in Oregon that probably have clients in the South. But my thing was, if I want to go after the automotive sector, if I want to go after commercial stuff or whatever, and especially e-learning, because if I work at Georgia Power Company, I want to hear a guy like me instructing. I don't want to hear a guy from Boston. I worked in the industry for 40 years. And when they would take us in a room and somebody talked that way, we were like, no, we didn't want to hear it. We wanted a friend to talk to us, a colleague. So I started really marketing hard that way about a year and a half ago. And I watched my direct business go from like 25% to almost 75 since then. And I was able to say, all right, I'll drop this platform. I got rid of Upwork 2 years ago. I haven't done an Upwork job. My profile's still there, and I'll occasionally get somebody hit me up, but I haven't done a valid job on there in 2 years. I did $30,000 on there my first year and a half.
Wow.
That's, but it was a lot of work, and I don't want to go back. I got rid of Upwork. I dropped off temporarily off Voice 123 because I had too much struggle auditioning and keeping that percentage up and doing this and that, because with this accent, if it wasn't a specialized job, it didn't help me. For some reason, I see more of those jobs on voices.com. I book okay on there, but I don't feel the pressure to audition that I did on the other. So instead of spending 2 to 3 hours a day on auditioning, I'm spending that researching companies, marketing, reaching out. I do as many cold calls as I do emails. Um, and I'm looking for places in the South, the Southeast, Texas, Oklahoma. I even book oddly sometimes in Utah and Idaho. I don't know why. And I've even had a car dealer out in California reach out and say, we want a Southern voice because when it hits the air, people stop and listen because it's different. So my goal is, like I said earlier, work less, make more, build these contacts and connections. They're repeat customers. One guy, like I said, I started earlier with him on a platform. I pulled him off. He had one little 5-minute YouTube streaming outdoor thing he was doing. He now has 5 shows on streaming TV, and I narrate all 5. You
Wow.
can't beat that.
No, you
This is a
cannot.
guy that stuck with me. And it's little things like that, and I just try to hold on to it and grab it. It's a lot of non-glamorous work, but it's a living. It pays the bills. And occasionally I get to do a Pfizer or a Yellowwood or a Department of Education of Kentucky or, whatever.
What's your favorite kind of work?
I love video games. I love video game sessions, especially when they have stuff if they're dubbing it from another country and you're in timelines and you got to get this in that timeline, and I don't know why I like that so much. Of course, as a kid I was one of those had the big imagination. G.I. Joe and Big Jim were playing with each other and fighting, and my Matchbox cars all talked, and I was a big imagination kid. I grew up on that, but I have no acting background, no nothing, but I just have a knack for doing that. I mean, I just enjoy the heck out of it. And then behind that is going to come commercial, and especially if it's a fun commercial. I love anything that's got a little comedic touch to it or whatever. And a lot of people that know me or have met me, they're like, he's kind of quiet, he's kind of dry. I can't imagine he does that kind of stuff. But it all started. I had gotten some crap, I forget what they call them, but some lead-ins for this Rise of Kingdoms game. And I was doing all these, throwing these high-pitched voices, and then I'd come back as the warrior, and they're talking to each other back and forth. And then I get to hear them edited up, and it's like 3 different people. You can't tell. And I love that stuff. And the last one I did a couple of weeks ago, I had 7 different characters in one video game.
You are the embodiment of, I think, what the journey that a lot of voice actors go through, and that is discovering who they are and leaning into it and standing up for it. And dude, it's been so fun to watch you grow, even over the last year since I've known you. And I'm looking for great things for Troy Holden, man. Thanks for
Paul,
spending time.
and let me thank you for all you do. One of the things that you said early on when we spoke on one of your consultation calls, you said too many VOs are leaving because they don't understand the business side, and they're very good at what they do. And that hit me hard because I knew I had a business background, but I knew this was going to be different and hard. But that really helped me focus and stay in there with it. And thanks for all you do in the industry. I mean, just watching some of you guys, stand up for the industry. I'm very, very proud of that. And some days I think, well, I've only been in it, 4 years, 3.5, 4 years. I don't have the rights to say what I need to say. I'm trying to at a different level, and especially in my Facebook group, I have a lot of new people in there, and I'm telling them, don't fall into this trap. Go back and listen to all my old VO Life podcasts where I was stupid, and then listen to me change somewhere around episode 40, and then listen to another change at episode 75. And then when it gets all the way up to 140 or 130 or whatever it is, you'll know what I've been through and whatever. And I really encourage those people to listen to that stuff, because I got sucked into the fruit punch, and then I was, drunk on the wine. And then all of a sudden I said, oh, here's the bourbon. And, here we are. So don't do the wrong thing and believe in yourself. It'll work.
Well, I think that's huge for everybody, because especially in today's world, Troy, everybody is putting out such a curated, vetted, sort of airbrushed look at their lives and their careers. And you've got the courage to say, hey, I've evolved over the years, and I'm not afraid to show that journey. And I think that's huge, man.
And still got a ways to go, but we'll get there.
I'm so grateful and proud to know you. I'm glad we got to spend some time together today. Troy Holden, everybody.
Thanks, Paul.